GM friends, and welcome to the future of gaming. You're listening to our weekly blockchain gaming rollup, and we should probably change the name. What do you guys think of FOGcast? Is that good? Should we find something new? Maybe we can let the community vote. Anyway, we need to get rid of the name because due to high demand, we decided to focus less on news and more on topics that interest us. So, that's what we're getting from now on.
So we are truly in the future of gaming, not the present of gaming, right?
Mm-hmm. It's true. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, yeah, 100%. So maybe it's irrelevant, right? But we are recording this where I am on the 30th of September. I don't know if this is relevant anymore because we're not doing the news. Anyway, we have Philip Collins, we have Devin Becker, we have myself, Nico Vereecke. Today we are talking about other stuff for a bunch of things than blockchain. So future of gaming, it's not only Web3, it's also AI and BCI. And if you don't know what BCI means, I'll explain in a bit. We're talking about Neal Stephenson's Lamina1, talking about Stadia, cloud gaming, distribution in Web3 games, and then we'll see if we have more time for more topics. But that's the most important thing. So last week, I'm sure you had a hard week, because we weren't there for you. We didn't record an episode. And I've heard many distressed call-outs in the Discord of what's happening, guys. But we had some content, We had a blog post, expertly written. So appreciate all of the people that helped out with that. But we're back. And so the reason we weren't there was I was away. I was in New York. We held our Bitcraft Summit, which is like a yearly summit where we invite a bunch of friends, a bunch of portfolio companies, and a bunch of our LPs to one place, which was Chelsea, New York. And we had a little summit. And so, man, it was a good summit. I was not intimately involved with all of the organization. Some people of my team were, and holy shit, they did a good job. And then, holy shit, is there some cool stuff being built? So, two things that stood out to me. So one is the three of us, or maybe two of us, I feel maybe less, but we're focused on this whole blockchain thing and what it could do for games. And so for us, in our minds, we're living in a world where, blockchain is the most important new technological shift around games. And then I'm at that summit and I see panels of people using AI in games. And I'm like, holy crap, blockchain is nothing, right? What these dudes are doing is absolutely going to change everything. And so that's one thing I'd like to touch upon. And then the second thing is maybe even more important, but we're going towards the matrix, guys. It's happening. So BCI, brain-computer interface. It's basically a thing that you put on your head and that can read some of your emotions. And the implications of that shit is just crazy. All right, so AI. Bitcraft, we invested in a company called InWorld AI. And so they're working on AI NPCs, which essentially means that I think on a very high level or at the surface level, this, for example, means that if you're building a game and you have a drastic in-game event, you can have NPCs change the way they react. So, for example, you live in a big world and there's suddenly a nuke in this world, right? Traditionally, you would have to have all of the voice lines and all of the communications of every NPC already pre-written for this new world that they suddenly live in, right? They need to react to what happens in the world that affects everyone. But so the company, the tech that this company is building is, will allow these NPCs to react to that, which I think will help, specifically massive MMOs, help with their NPC crowd of characters and allow them to do more events and do more cool shit within their game world. I can go on, but I'll let you guys share your thoughts and experiences around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the coolest things about the AI integration with NPCs is just how open-ended I think a lot of these MMOs, to your point, can get. I think, in the past, we've seen sometimes you talk to an NPC, you have 3 or 4 options of what you can say to them or the quest that they can give you. If you can couple the power of artificially intelligent NPCs with, procedural generation, you can make some really cool storylines that are virtually infinite And basically just like never ending core loops within these incredible looking worlds that we've come to know over the last decade. And so there's definitely a lot of cool stuff there. And I think that's kind of how I bucket AI in terms of what we see in deal flow a lot is, intelligent NPCs, and then, artificially intelligent art generation platforms. And so I think those two coupled together is going to be able to create some really cool experiences over the next 10 years.
I mean, technically we've always had AI in NPCs, right? But it's just, this is more like dynamic, right? And less like scripted states, things like that. And like normally I would doubt like a lot of this stuff, but I think the AI art stuff has convinced me that there's like a lot more potential for like things to actually expand beyond just really simple if then kind of logic or expert systems, or a lot of because a lot of the AI hadn't advanced too much since the 80s, and then mostly we'd been moving towards what was more like statistical models essentially. But lately the creative stuff in terms of being able to like blend patterns of things and create artificial people and artificial art is starting to make me think there's a lot of possibility, especially with even like the GPT-3 stuff for like AI Dungeon and stuff like that. That being said, for people like me that enjoy griefing and breaking systems, this is going to be a whole lot of fun, I think, in MMOs. As if you remember like what happened with the Microsoft's chatbot on Twitter, where they had to shut it down because it people started turning into like a Nazi. And I can only imagine that it's going to be a thing, right? Like you already have OpenAI constantly being overly vigilant about censorship of how their tool's being used. This is going to be a similar kind of situation. Now, I don't know what kind of parameters they're setting on it, but I can only imagine like in a full multiplayer world, similar to what happened with Twitter, people are going to abuse the system. If a system can learn, then any of you've seen Chappie, you see what happens like when you got, gangster rappers teaching Short Circuit robot how to live, right? And so you're going to have similar potential where if it responds dynamically, that means it's also essentially taking user input to drive what it does in a way that is not necessarily pre-planned, which will be amazing if that actually works out, but also really unpredictable, which I think is not scary, but is certainly going to be potential for news stories coming out of games that are very unpredictable.
Devin, you're such a downer, man. Come on.
I'm excited about it. It's a downer for everyone else who doesn't enjoy the griefing. I'm looking forward to it.
Dude, so first of all, Chappie, amazing movie, highly recommended. Second, I remember when I was in high school, we had this game, which was basically you go on Wikipedia, you click, give me a random page, and then you try to get to Hitler in as few clicks as possible. The new game is going to be how fast can you turn an AI into Hitler? So that's the new game that we're going to have.
Convince them that all the people that are playing are disposable, and the NPC needs to take over, and oh boy, yeah, it could get fun.
Yeah,
these moderation and anti-toxicity platforms are going to really like the
it's going to be funny because they're going to try and generate. They're going to have AI moderators moderating the AI. And so it's going to be like a war between like the Nazi-esque fascist, moderator AI versus the other one that's trying to act like Nazis.
I mean, it definitely does show you how all of these different things that might seem very separate on the surface, like technology and gaming and outside of gaming, stacks so cleanly. And it's interesting seeing all of these different things come together. And they're not independent. They're really collaborative tools that interact in interesting ways. So I don't know. I'll be curious to see how a lot of these games can handle such open-ended structures in a lot of ways, where if you have smart NPCs that can kind of guide you in different directions, or maybe change the quest lines in ways that aren't as kind of railed as they are in modern games today, there's going to be a cool balance of it being very open-ended with it being at least a little bit structured to avoid it just being an infinite and sometimes misleading experience.
I feel like it well suits something like Skyrim, which you're used to being like, it's kind of janky, like quality's kind of all over the place, buggy, but also like open-ended, and you can kind of explore and do things that you wouldn't expect. And I think that kind of environment where it's like sandboxy-ish, but with like some story and some content, I think would be totally ideal. I mean, I don't know what Bethesda's doing because now they've been basically absorbed by Microsoft, but I think that would be a perfect game genre to experiment with this in.
you have some of these super random Skyrim mods where you can turn the dragons into like trains. Dude, I can't wait for an NPC come to me like, holy crap, did you see that train fly through the air?
You're like, did a player get into my game?
My one other thing so we had a few panels around AI in games, and the way they framed it, which I found interesting, was they see AI as a assistance tool for people to essentially lower the barrier of creation, which happens within games, but also in art, right? Where you have a lot of artists who are like, all of this stable diffusion, mid-journey stuff, it's not real art, right? But the way they describe it is, if you can just quickly implement so you build a world, or like, for example, me, I have some good ideas, but I'm not very creative, right? And so, all of the areas where I would not be creative, I could help make use of artificial intelligence to, create a new world, right? Where they fill in the gaps where my creativeness lacks. And so that's the way they were mostly framing it. And I found it interesting. And so, after seeing some of because they actually did demos. And so they had a conversation with one of the AIs, which, it took questions from the audience. And so we didn't turn it into Hitler, but we did ask the bot, which was a she, about IP and that kind of stuff and AI. And then it was really funny because she gave like a good explanation. And then in the end, we're going to have to, this is going to have to be decided by the courts, which was like a kind of, mic drop moment. And everyone was like, holy crap, this is real. So that was impressive and exciting.
It feels like an evolution of procedural generation in that sense. Of like, you take like Minecraft, right? The way Minecraft generated its levels using procedural systems with like a seed, and the way that people are doing art off of like the prompts they put in. It feels like we're like saying like, okay, we had procedural generation systems that were very algorithm based. Now we're using like systems that are closer to like general intelligence systems to be that procedure now. But they're still trained. Like, so rather than writing an algorithm from scratch, you're training an algorithm using input data and then having that be the procedural generation. So like, if you look at it that way, like we've been heading this direction for quite some time in games. And like going back to even like the early days of like the games that led up to Skyrim, like the older Elder Scrolls games, like they kind of had that feel of like being this huge world where everything was almost like semi-procedurally generated and like kind of, somewhat variable set of like Lego blocks everywhere. But it does feel like we've been progressing this direction for quite a while, and that this is kind of inevitable, I think, in a way. And I think level generation, like world content generation, just based off of what we've seen in art, I think will be like really good for this. I mean, you may get some really surreal landscapes and stuff like that, but I think you could get some really cool procedurally generated, essentially, worlds that may not be always consistent, but should be interesting and hopefully surprising most of the time.
Mm-hmm. In a few decades, maybe less, we'll be able to say, I want to have a Skyrim-style world, battle royale game with Halo-type guns, 100 players, and the AI will generate everything for you just from that prompt, similar to what we have with the art today.
Crazy, and it'll be maybe a slightly sad day in the fact that I think we can appreciate all of the work and effort that goes into what it takes to make amazing games today. And I think that aspect might start to fade in certain ways. And, I'm not saying that games will be made entirely by computers in the future, but I think we'll maybe lose the ability to have that appreciation, and maybe the appreciation falls on the engineers that are building these algorithms that make it possible. But you're almost two layers removed. But at the same time, it's also incredibly functional. It helps you build better games faster. And so I think that appreciation and the sentiment that I'm talking about there is going to be overshadowed by faster development cycles. People can push out product quicker, and people can push out, product that has focus, elsewhere outside of design. Maybe they're spending more time on, thinking about game mechanics and implementing them in a more unique way. So while there might be a little bit of a sad day in terms of appreciation of all the effort that goes into design in certain cases, I think it'll be offset or more than offset by other factors that we as consumers are pounding the table for.
Right. We might just being appreciating the craftsmen that are designing the data set for it, or setting
Right.
parameters, or like do it like crafting the AI itself. Like, so we have all these like fragmented smaller AIs that are like boutique AIs for different things that people have like curated and put together and stuff. And then that's like its own craftsmanship. And I'm sure we'll move on to other things, as you said. Like we won't run out of things to appreciate. We'll just shift what we're being interested in.
Yep.
This relates very smoothly to the next technology that was discussed a bit on our summit, which was BCI, or Brain-Computer Interface. Essentially, there's two types of BCI. There is invasive and non-invasive BCI. So invasive is where there's literally like there's a surgery and there's something implanted into your brain or close to your brain. And then the non-invasive one is literally like a helmet that you put on and that it has sensors and it can feel stuff. And so, this technology is like, it's evolving super fast. And so you have people right now that are paraplegic, that can barely move, but that are able to use these types of technologies. I think even the non-invasive one to like move robot arms, stuff like that, which is fascinating. And then, one of the questions was, okay, how does this relate to games? And so I initially, like, I'd always imagined that, in 40 years from now, I'll plug a USB stick in the back of my head and I'll be teleported inside Skyrim, right? And I'll be, in the characters. I don't know how to describe. You know what I mean. Anyway, so but on a shorter term, the way they were describing it is not necessarily as you think the input, but the game actually uses outputs and some of your emotions. So essentially, what it means is you put this helmet on, you're playing a game, and the game, or like the BCI, actually registers what kind of events trigger what kind of emotions in your brain, which means that, if you want to play a scary game and you're an arachnophobe, so you're very scared of spiders, they're going to show a spider and, they're going to notice that, holy crap, this guy, he doesn't like a spider. So we're going to put more spiders in there. And so essentially the game will actually like adapt to, the things that you either like or dislike or in whatever like context you want, which becomes fascinating, because then if I combine that with what we just talked about, where game creation itself becomes AI driven, that essentially like one of the future jobs is going to be, you're going to almost be a lab rat, where they put you in a chair, they put a helmet on your head, and you're going to play games, and you don't have to do or say anything because they're just going to register what's fun and what's not fun, maybe like that's how game development will happen at some point, or maybe fine tuning
faster. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it'll make it more objective as well, where it's like, if we can just read the signals of your brain rather than asking you for your feedback 30 minutes after playing, when you're maybe like, less clear on your thinking at the time in the moment. There's a lot of really cool things in terms of playtesting and how you can leverage that to build better products for these dev teams. So I think that's probably one of the cooler use cases I've seen as well, Nico. There's some ridiculously smart people working on these applications, and it's really cool. I am curious to see how that plays out on the input side as well. Like what types of games that could be interesting for, where your brain is literally the controller.
So I've actually done that.
Yeah.
I did a game jam for NeuroSky, which was like the EEG kind of one. And it was pretty interesting. Like you definitely realize like those kinds of devices like can be pretty inaccurate at first, like, without training and calibration on individuals. Obviously that's gotten better, right? And we have like AI tools to like calibrate stuff faster and smarter and stuff. But you do realize like there's a certain looseness to it, as there's with any kind of sensor. Anyone who like played early Connect games, or like any kind of thing that's like a sensor of the body or other things like that, there's like this period where it's like really kind of loosey goosey, and it was interesting to try and develop for, because you only had like certain kinds of vague inputs where like, is someone focusing and concentrating, or are they like stressed, or like you have very like simple ideas of stuff. And it reminds me of like the idea of where we have different like brainwave patterns. It's like, I'm in gamma or delta or whatever. And it's like these vague ideas of like what that means. Same with the idea of like emotions being kind of this chemical soup in your body, where like, I think it'll be a while before we get accuracy there, but it was interesting to try and develop games around this. So I had a game where you were like actually boxing. So if you were focused, it would like build up power, and if you were relaxed, it like would increase your defense, and then you would like actually blink to like punch. And it was like very simple, but you didn't have, it was totally hands-free, which was kind of fun, you know, it just very simple system. But the cool thing about these sorts of things is not necessarily like just a like binary kind of inputs or like simple gradient inputs. It's the biofeedback stuff. So like the stuff that Nico's bringing up about, you know, it learning from your inputs in response to stuff. There's so much we can do with biofeedback devices where we're able to like enhance learning or change people's like emotional states and other things like that really quickly. So like we combine that AI stuff, right? We're talking about like, AI NPCs, and they can learn that you react certain ways to certain things. AI NPCs can suddenly become very manipulative. Like obviously you could design them to be that way, but it could be really interesting when you combine those two things with the AI and the ability for the AI to read your mind, essentially. Now, obviously, that can go down a very dystopian or negative path very quickly, but content-wise, that could be really interesting. I mean, imagine, you know, like those Japanese dating sim games when suddenly, like, it can actually tell how you're reacting, and you combine that with, like, speech to text and, like, text to speech, and, like, suddenly you're just talking with it, and, like, it's reading your emotions and stuff rather than just your face. But then we have like biofeedback calibration stuff, so it can like look at your face, you know, like all the facial tracking stuff they're trying to put in, for example, in theory in the Quest Pro and stuff like that, where they're trying to actually track your facial stuff. So then it's like suddenly reading your mind, looking at your face, so your body language, and it gets pretty crazy, I think, pretty fast. As Nico's pointing out, like this stuff accelerates really quickly as soon as we start getting like a good foothold in something that's kind of working. And like I said, it could get pretty dystopian in a way, depending on, like, just imagine the power of using it for advertising, right? Like we had stuff where we had like eye tracking heat maps and stuff before to like try and figure out how people are looking at things when they're looking at them. Now all of a sudden, if we're reading their minds, like advertising gets way more effective when suddenly you actually know how people are reacting to it, and you can really tell then if they're actually paying attention, and it gets pretty nutty.
One of the discussions I often have is, and this is completely unrelated to gaming, or kind of, is that in our modern society, essentially what's happening is that companies are incentivized to hack our reward systems as humans. And you can see this in like food, social media, you know, and general entertainment, you know, alcohol, drugs, porn, like all of that is designed in such a way, like we're not used to that being so available. And so, you know, given technological advancements, companies essentially get more tools to understand better what gives us these outsized, you know, inside our head rewards. And so, you know, this is why one of my books that I really liked is a book by Harari, the author of Sapiens. He has his 21 lessons for the 21st century, where he puts, like, one of his lessons is that meditation is probably one of the most important things humans can do these days, because meditations allows you to like sync with your reward systems and realize that, you know, everything that you feel is not necessarily like absolute truth, if that makes sense. And so, anyway, that's another discussion, maybe not for this podcast, but if you want to jam about this, I'm down. It's something I think about a lot. Cool. Next topic. Neal Stephenson's Lamina1. I, you know, half an hour ago read the white paper and some highlights, right? So one of the problems that Neal Stephenson is trying to solve here, by the way, he's the author of what's called Snow Crash, which was the first mentioning of the thing called the Metaverse. And so he's called the father of the Metaverse or whatever. Like he coined the term, and he also described like what it would be like, what it would look like. I read Snow Crash, and I'm going to be honest, I struggled. I found, you know, the ideas in it pretty good, but I found the way it was written so hard to get through. I recently read Ready Player One, and it's so much easier to read. So, you know, I have a clear favorite, but nevertheless, like, I think that the story is great, and I think some people like the way it was written, so it's probably just me. Did you guys read the book?
I read it a long time ago. I don't remember the writing style. I mean, I remember enjoying it, but I was very into cyberpunk kind of stuff. So I do recommend people that do like it, though. Diamond Age is another one of his hugely popular books that is still like ahead of its time in a lot of ways, I think. So that's another good recommendation. I think it's a different style of writing too. So if you didn't like Snow Crash, you might enjoy that more. I don't know.
Yeah. I haven't yet, which I need to prioritize given the field that we work and live in. So I talk to Metaverse Devin every week. I gotta get in touch with his knowledge.
Just read the Cliff Notes.
Yeah. And so one of the first quotes in the white paper is that one of the problems today is that there's and I'm quoting, inexorable economic forces drive investors to pay artists as little as possible while steering their creative output in the directions that involve the least financial risk. So essentially, like, it's all of the problems that Web2 has and all of the centralization of these huge platforms.
Which I think is kind of funny though, because like I read that when I was going through the white paper as well, and I was thinking that it's almost a two-sided problem, right? Where the investors have expectations, people create things that are in line with investor expectations to get funding to build out their visions. And so we've kind of seen this in like Web3 gaming, which is a little bit ironic from that statement, where everyone's kind of huddled around a few different genres or a few different themes and approaches to building out Web3 games, because they know that's where the money is, that's where they're able to get funding, that's what they're able to build out. So it's kind of come full circle where even on the Web3 side, you're still just chasing capital from centralized sources today, at least.
But look at art in general, Nico. Like patronages and stuff like that. The way art has always worked is involved some sort of weird commercialization or patronage system or stuff like that. I don't think it's not a new problem, and I don't think it's a problem that's going to be like solved by some technological or economic or financial technology that's going to. I mean, you might shift it, but I don't think you solve it, because I think there's too many different forces at play. In terms of like, if you assume survival and other things are still a factor for humans that are like pressures that make it so that there is an influence from commercial interests or royalty interests or whoever it might be, that people that have the ability to give you something in return for your art is almost always going to influence art. And you're going to have to kind of have this divide where you're like halfway between worlds. It reminds me of like game developers that often like start by being contractors first and then work their way up into enough resources to be able to make their own things. It's just going to be a thing where, especially craft kind of stuff, where you have some sort of craft to what you do, or skill to the art. Like, you need to develop it as well. And I think it's great to try and build cool new ways to disrupt that and shift it. But like the whole history of, I think, creativity and money is kind of fraught with those being interwoven.
Don't you think that what you just described is being solved by this concept of like 10,000 true fans, where traditionally, because distribution, which is a topic we might get to later, was such an issue, right? And especially direct attribution of value from the consumer to the producer of any type of creative output. And that, through, I think, Web3 technologies, we can have, like, you can, if you have 10,000 true fans that are willing to pay you $1 a month, you can live off that as a creator, right? And I think, this is something we've started seeing through like YouTube and Twitch and other of these platforms. But there's still these intermediaries there. I don't know, like YouTube, what do they pay? Is it probably less than half, right? That they pay out to their creators. And so it feels to me like what he's trying to solve here, or at least like he puts on paper that he's trying to solve, is just the fact that these platforms are so powerful that they can tax just so much.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I don't know. That's I think this is one of the core theses behind Web3. It's just like this whole disintermediation thing, and because we've
heard that from the internet in general, like Napster is going to disrupt music, or like these kinds of things we've heard about for a while, and I don't think they're not true, but I think we've definitely like been hearing that kind of variations on that theme ever since the internet started, where it's like, we're disrupting publishers, we're disrupting all these other things. But ultimately, at some point, we shift back towards publishers because of discovery issues and, distribution issues. And at some point, like there might be plenty of fans to go around, but finding and reaching 10,000 true fans is not a trivial thing. We have the survivorship bias where we hear all these success stories and don't hear about all the people that completely failed to reach that or to achieve that. And I don't think that makes it any necessarily less achievable, but it is one of those things where there is still a place for publishers or other things that help with that process. Like YouTube also facilitated a ton of that for people in a way that, like, because of their technology, because Google could go crazy on the tech and make it, just able to broaden out and like be this huge platform that it is. Like there's obviously two sides to that, and I'm not arguing for that corporations should be running art or anything like that at all. I'm just saying like there's considerations that factor into this, and you have early and late stage stuff. So it's like the App Store, we had the early stage where everyone like could be a hit potentially, and then as it got deeper and deeper, and everyone started to just like cloning each other, and it was a war of who could market the hardest. Or now like to the point where it's who can buy players. I mean, we've gotten to the point where we're going from like trying to monetize all the players to literally just trying to actually acquire them at this point by paying them. Like it goes through this transitionary period, and I don't think Web3 is going to be immune to that.
100%. Yeah. I think the way I look at the internet is the internet essentially commoditized information and information like transferring. And what Web3 is doing is, I think, it's commoditizing like value flows, something that wasn't traditionally possible. And so I agree that we still have the dynamics that we see today, but I do think that again, like we're chipping away at that. It has to be centralized to work. Something anyway.
Yeah.
Good, because we started this talking about Lamina1 and we ended up going like super meta and super philosophical. Let's get back to what our friend Neal Stephenson is building. So Lamina1 is a layer 1 blockchain. It is Metaverse as a service. So we're not talking about SaaS companies now. We're talking about MaaS companies now. All right, that's the new kid on the block, and that's the cool thing that people should be doing. It consists of community economic participation and incentives, which I guess we just discussed. And also they're going to be producing original content, which I assume means that they're going to be building a game, which is probably going to be like an MMO, like Metaverse style experience. So that's what they're building. I'm curious, Phil, if Neal Stephenson comes to you and he's like, yo, Phil, I got a deal for you, man. I'm building the infrastructure for an open metaverse. I'm going to, it's going to be a layer 1, Web3 has to be in there, but we're also going to build our game. It's going to have Metaverse as a service. What do you think as a like more infrastructure focused investor?
At first, I think, oh God, this entry point's going to be brutal because Neal Stephenson's attached to it and his name's going to carry a lot of value. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's tough because obviously there's a lot of credibility around this team and the way that they think about this space. I think I'd be a little bit skeptical around just like how much they're going after. I think we've seen this a lot where you're trying to build the infrastructure while you're trying to build the game, while you're trying to build the protocol. It's just a lot. And I mean, maybe because of that brand that they have and because of the amount of capital that they could theoretically attract, maybe they can hire a big enough team to have, 3 divisions that are doing this synchronously. But I mean, I think I'd get a little bit concerned doing all 3 at once. Obviously, it's circumstantial for the team and the resources that are available. But I mean, I think that's like the flag that goes up in my mind, just because we've seen so many people doing one of those 3 and trying to execute on those really well. And in this world, I'm not sure that you necessarily have to own all 3 up front, right? I mean, obviously, in the end, things merge, companies merge, technologies merge, but going out and saying, hey, we're starting by doing everything is always a little bit, I think, intimidating from the investor side. I don't know, Nico, I'd be curious to hear how you think about that too.
Yeah, very similarly. I'm curious, maybe we can do at the end of this segment, we can do a bet about how much they've raised, right? We know that our friend Gabe Layden raised 200 million. How much did our friend Neal Stephenson raise? Let's see. But I fully agree with you.
200 million, right?
What?
Are we pegging the over under at 200 million? Because I'm going to take the under on that one. But
Price is right.
Likely. Yeah. We can do a guess, and I'm like, I don't know if it ever comes out how much they raised. We can probably figure it out. Anyway, I want to get back to your point where whenever I see a deck where we're doing this and this and this, the more ands you add, the more things that can go wrong, because things go wrong with startups a lot, right? If you're trying to do 10 things and they're all dependent on each other, as a startup, what's your success chance at doing anything well? It's less than 50%, but let's take 50%. Like the more ands you add, the smaller the percentage of you becoming successful. And so it's very interesting, right? Because with what they're building, so they're essentially building a layer 1 blockchain, which is going to be all blockchains are kind of two-sided marketplaces where you need people to actually build shit on top of there, and then you need people to consume the shit that's being built on there. And so this famously has the cold start problem, which means that you need shit to be built for people to come, but you need people to be there for people to be incentivized, for builders to be incentivized to build shit, right? And so that there's this famous problem, and a lot of these Web3 platforms that I see realize this, and so they're like, look, we're building the infrastructure, but you know what? We're also going to be building a game on top, and it seems like that's what they're doing here. And so they almost have to be that ambitious, and it seems like in this technology, I think all of the projects need to be of a like enormous scope because of this whole cold start problem, and then two, it's also interesting that like how forefront the name Neal Stephenson here is, and it almost seems like you need someone like that, or it is a very positive point in order to get people excited about it, because the technology and the business and the project relies so much on other people doing stuff. You like the marketing is almost half of the project, right? We have seen some super strong technical teams. What is one example? Like there are some of these blockchains, like Zilliqa, for example. Zilliqa is like a blockchain no one talks about, but they have some like I'm pretty sure that the technology is actually like pretty solid, but no one talks about them, so no one's building on them, so no one's excited about them, so they're failing. But they might technically be the strongest, and so it's this, it's a dynamic I'm thinking about more and more, and I see more and more where I don't know how you win this. Like maybe one way is attaching like the father of the metaverse to yourself, or or building like these huge projects. But it feels like harder and harder to make a major impact without like a 50 million plus budget.
Yeah, I mean, and in Web3, I think one of the ways people have done this is just through their wallets. And I think like Polygon, for example, has done an incredible job of this. They've used their deep pockets to attract a lot of content. And through all of that content, they've attracted a lot of attention. And through all that attention, they've attracted a lot of traditional enterprises that are considering going into Web3. And so they have an extensive list of companies that everyone has heard of. And that Polygon is like their on-ramp into Web3. And I mean, it all kind of traces back on the paper trail to the money that they've been able to deploy that attracts that attention. And so even if those games aren't good, they've attracted enough attention where they've actually created value through the content they're bringing on the platform, purely on the promise of that content. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard in this space because it is so early that a lot of the most promising content just hasn't been fully announced or revealed yet. And so you're kind of working under the promise of a lot of things. But I mean, that has a lot of power in terms of name recognition and eventually, commercially.
I mean, to your point, that's like Polygon brought over, I forget his name off the top of my head. I feel like it was Ryan Wyatt or something like that. From head of YouTube Gaming over. And that's an example of a big name, right? Like where they were like, oh, this dude helped build YouTube Gaming. Like he's someone who could help build a new game related network. And so like that stuff does matter. And like you even kind of essentially pointed to it, Nico, when you mentioned Gabriel Layden, right? Like who would care about Limit Break had they not attached his name to it, right? Like, and him make his big old stink online, or just be like, some random company raised $200 million and they've just got these weird waifu JPEGs. Like, what the hell is this? Like, it wouldn't have the same level of like recognition and attention and stuff without like a name attached. And it's not like Neal Stephenson's new to attaching his names to stuff. He was pretty associated with Magic Leap before, and he actually was one of the advisors, if you look towards the end of the white paper, on Shrapnel. Like, so dude's like attached himself to a lot of stuff, and he's also got a lot of at least knowledge in terms of like, if you look at the research he does for his books and stuff, obviously he's going back to the original, term Metaverse, but he's also got like a good crypto background. Dude wrote like 3 books that are like telephone book sized books on cryptography related plots. And dude's like, written stuff about video games. Like, I'm not saying that makes him an expert, but the dude obviously does his research, knows the space very well, helped create the concepts of the space and things like that. And I think that's a big help. And you attach his name to it. And then suddenly it's like, oh, well, at least someone who kind of understands this really well isn't just some random finance dude deciding to make this stuff. And I read through the white paper as well. And like one thing I found kind of interesting is, I mean, first off, they are like way over scoped. I think I don't think they hit those 2023 roadmaps like even close to on target, but they're at least trying to do some stuff to kind of bootstrap. Like if you read the section where they're looking to kind of build off Avalanche's technology as a way to kind of like bootstrap some of that L1 stuff. So they're not like looking to build an L1 purely from scratch. And I think that was probably smart to say like, we're going to take some existing technology. We're going to kind of try and retrofit it for our purposes and stuff like that. I do think, though, there are a lot of things in there that they're going to run into huge problems with. Like when they're talking about all the Metaverse data stuff, like they're not really laying out how they're going to actually do that. They're just talking about the problems that they're going to try and help solve. And I think those problems are a lot deeper than they're taking for granted. Like data storage and distribution in distributed networks is a huge problem. Like there's a reason it's really expensive to store data on Ethereum. And no one's really got a great solution. IPFS has its own problems. They all have some downsides, and no one's really like solved that yet. And so I think, maybe they find another solution like Avalanche where they just go, we're going to take this tech and we're going to use that. And I'm not saying it's undoable, but I do think they probably are biting off a bit more than they can realistically chew without either like bootstrapping off of other stuff or maybe even just straight up acquiring other companies with the tech and stuff like that. Because I don't think you can just hire your way into that. You can't just be like, we'll hire another division of smart people that'll solve this. It's more like if someone solves it, you could buy them or you can take their technology and use it. But I think that's the only way we realistically see it. But that being said, if they focus on a vertical slice, like you're saying, Nico, where they're like, let's just take this blockchain tech that works pretty well. Let's build our game on top of it and let's grow out organically from there. And then use that as our use case for then building that into our broader technology, like the way Unreal became the Unreal Engine. And all these sorts of things are like built out from like an initial use case and then expand from there. Or even Unity was built off of a game being built and then they just decided the engine was better. So we may see a situation like that, right? That being said, it does have that problem of like, let's get people using the platform first. I mean, look how long it took Roblox to get to the point where it was when it came to like getting enough people on it that people even cared about it as a platform. And like you see Manticore being stuck in that situation right now with their like Roblox alternative. So that's going to be the big thing. And that's where you need the big name attached. I think having Neal Stephenson's name is like the only thing that's going to make people take a second look at it, yet another metaverse.
I didn't know Neal Stephenson was, or had put in so much time or like on the technical side. Because I found it hard. Sorry?
It reminds me of Michael Crichton, who studied tons of science and then write stuff like Jurassic Park and stuff like based off of science.
Yeah, didn't know that. Okay, so new objective. Let's get Neal Stephenson on here and let's ask him what he's up to. Fascinating, and it seems like it's going to be a while since until we have more information and how things turn out. I was curious about the fact that they're building on Avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think about that, Phil?
Honestly, yeah, that was a little bit surprising to me too. I don't have a ton of thoughts on it at the moment, but it did stick out. I feel like we saw a little Avalanche resurgence on the gaming side. I don't know. I've lost track of time. I guess like probably late last year where they were making a big push into getting content onboarded onto Avalanche, and then it kind of just went radio silent. But that might be more of a macro thing than an Avalanche platform. What's that?
Krabata and DeFi Kingdoms, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So let's see what our buddy Neal spins up there. Our next topic. I wish I could do like sound effects with like the sad song. There's like this is like this Scottish bagpipe thing that they play when people pass away. Anyway, it's time to talk about Stadia. Anyone wants to give a eulogy here? Devin, you're a big fan apparently.
Yeah,
I see some tears swelling up there.
I see some genuine tears coming out of Devin right now.
Honestly, so I'm someone who played on live back in the day. Like I'm a big fan of cloud gaming. I think it's really cool, and it's like one of those things. It's not just like convenient. It's one of those things that by kind of making the platform work differently, you can really kind of expand how people play games. And I was someone, for example, I only really recently finally upgraded my computer to the point where I could play the game that I commentated for 5 years. And so I was playing it on Stadia as soon as it was like available on there. Like that was a big deal to me because suddenly I could play it like in a reasonable way. And I saw like just in the Reddit and stuff like that, so many dads who suddenly could get back into gaming again because they could do it on their phone and they could do it on their TV. And I think it's really cool. But unfortunately, it's from Google, and I've been burned many, many times by being really into stuff that Google just takes out back and shoots. This actually lasted a lot longer than many of their other graveyard projects like Google Wave, or if anyone even remembers Google Buzz. I liked Google Plus a lot as well. There's like a lot of projects they've just straight up shot, and I think people saw this coming for a while. But I think honestly, I'd blame Microsoft more than anyone else for basically just killing this. Like, and that's only because Microsoft did a fantastic job of just taking over cloud gaming with just their acquisitions, the money they spent on everything, the huge amount of like AAA releases on there. They just did a fantastic job. The technology, though, Google absolutely wins. Anyone I see bashing Stadia either had bad network issues for some reason because of their router or something else, or just didn't play it. Like, if you played it and on like a decent network, you understood like this is like game-changing technology. There's almost no latency, and that's noticeable in any way. And it's like high quality. It's really good. It was the best way to play a Cyberpunk when that first came out. Like, that was the best platform to play it on, period. And it's just fantastic technology. That being said, the upside is while Stadia is being killed as a brand, the technology will still be around. And I think I read even that Sony is potentially using it as a way to help them compete with Xbox, which, if that's the case, is good, because they've tried to do their like remote gaming stuff they've done for a long time, where you could like play your PlayStation stuff remotely on your Vita or whatever it was and stuff like that. So like it's not the end of the tech, but it absolutely was by far the best implementation of cloud gaming that existed. That being said, Xbox has gotten better. The cloud stuff has gotten better, but they do stupid stuff like if you want to play cloud stuff on your computer, you've got to use an Xbox controller. And I originally did it with the Stadia controller, and then they started making it so, no controller detected unless you used an Xbox controller. It's stuff like just dumb stuff like that, where I'm like, this is definitely still Microsoft at the end of the day. But they won. Luna is a non-starter realistically. Stadia is essentially dead. Like, it's just Xbox One. That's it.
Tears in my eyes.
It feels like the only way Luna could compete is if Amazon goes out and acquires an insane library of content, and then they try to commercialize it. And even if the tech's inferior, what I feel like Microsoft's done so well is the bundling, right? Like Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, it's included, and like just onboarding and getting people to trust cloud gaming, because there's such a level of skepticism. Even if you haven't tried it, you've heard about input lag, latency issues, and like unless you literally don't have a device that can run a game that you really want to play, it's kind of like, who cares, right? Like if I have a PC rig that can run all my games and that's where I spend most of my gaming time, I don't really have a direct use case for it necessarily. But I think Xbox is winning the trust and adoption game through the way that they're bundling. But I mean, yeah, you have some pretty heavy hitters with Nvidia and potentially Amazon and Sony still in the ring. So I don't know. I just think it's going to be hard to overcome Microsoft's library at this point and the way that they're able to bring it to the market.
Yep.
I played Destiny 2, like streaming.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's free to play on there.
Yeah, it's free to play. And so I tried it, and it gave me a bit of a headache. So it's just, and maybe it's my internet connection. It should be pretty fast. Like here in Europe,
it's usually the router. Like the router you go through is usually what causes the problems, not so much your internet connection. Because I played it on like my phone on like 4G and like been just totally fine still.
Really? Yeah, I don't know. I've played a lot of first-person shooters, and so you get really sensitive to ping issues. And so for me, it feels like I don't see myself ever like playing on cloud, because I can like. I've built my own computer, and I'll upgrade it if there's games that I can't play on it anymore. Just, I know, maybe I'm a purist, but it feels to me like, if I have there's always going to be like in any multiplayer game, there's always going to be some like latency, right? But I want that latency to be between me and other players, and not between me and like my full gaming experience. So I don't know. Yeah, these are my thoughts, and I'm curious, like, Devin, you're clearly a cloud bull. Like, how do you see this evolve? Where's cloud gaming in 20 years? Is that the way we're going to be, like most of people will experience games, or everyone will experience these huge games?
I think there to a certain extent, right? And I think the problem is like you guys are kind of thinking on the PC side, and it's really the console side that they're going to hit hard, and that's why part of the reason Microsoft's also waiting. Google doesn't really have a console, right? You had to buy a special Chromecast to use it on your TV. They eventually were like starting to put cloud stuff in smart TVs, but at the end of the day, like Microsoft has like the console install base to get people into it. So like for example, I was out of the country at like an Airbnb, and there was an Xbox there, and it's just like, oh, I just popped in my account, and suddenly I could just play whatever game I wanted off the cloud thing. Didn't have to download anything, didn't have to do much other than put in my password and authorize it, and suddenly I could play whatever game I wanted on there. And that was like really nice. Obviously, like account management can be kind of weird with that sort of thing on other people's Xboxes, but like the idea is games are getting huge for one thing. Like download sizes, like if you've owned a PlayStation, you spend half your time downloading updates. And not playing the game, right? Like it's frustrating. Even Steam can be like that sometimes, but a lot of times you leave Steam on kind of auto updating and stuff like that. And so you kind of ignore it to some extent, but I've definitely noticed it like with my Steam Deck because I have to kind of turn it on every once in a while and make it like do updates. And so like as games continue to grow and get bigger and bigger, and that becomes more of a problem, and people are like struggling to keep up. Part of the reason consoles are so popular is because people don't want to keep up with the PC rat race, right? They just want to get a console and they just want to play stuff. And I think if people aren't having to go get this like $500 console because it has the newest tech, and it's more just like, hey, I could just get the latest cloud console and I can just play whatever at the high quality settings. Like that's pretty compelling. Like, I mean, when you played Cyberpunk on Stadia, it was like on high quality settings that required a pretty high end PC to be able to do. And obviously the PC purists are not going to be phased or care. But for people that just wanted to play on a laptop or on their phone or on their TV, like it can be a game changer because those are situations where that's not so accessible. So I think if you take the opposite approach and stop thinking about the PC side, especially I know, Nico, you're European and like PC is beats console a lot of times out there. Whereas over here in America, especially on the West Coast, like console dominates. And so like, especially in America, I think obviously our infrastructure is kind of hit and miss across the States, but it has a lot of potential, but it is cyclical, right? We had like On Live and other stuff in the past that kind of comes and goes, and the technology is getting there, but it's probably not there where everyone's going to switch over to that yet. And I think maybe 10 years from now, like that's the dominant console system, but maybe not like the only game system. But I think when it comes to like playing on your phone, super high quality, nice games, if you've tried that, like with Stadia or even the Xbox One or whatever, it is really nice to see these really super crisp, high def graphics of like full on AAA games on your phone without your phone like turning into like a nuclear power plant in your hand, like heating up. Yeah. It's nice.
It's also an interesting use case for a lot of developing markets too. I mean, like on the mobile side, even though mobile adoption's catching up, mobile hardware is improving in a lot of these developing countries. To Devin's point, a lot of the heavier games, like if you have a 10 gigabyte download, like not every piece of hardware is going to support that. And even though in a lot of those developing markets, network infrastructure is going to have to catch up and improve to make this a seamless experience, it is a more cost-effective way for a lot of these IPs to be distributed in parts of the world that they're not even coming close to penetrating it today.
It was even useful for playtesting. Like a lot of game companies were really finding it useful for doing the playtesting, especially during COVID, when it was really hard to, you weren't all in the same place, all that infrastructure for getting quick playtests and updates of builds. Like the ability to do that over the cloud was actually, a lot of developers were finding that really useful. Because they could just do that all remotely and not have to ship builds out to like individual computers and things like that. So I mean, there's definitely use cases. Like Google got to the point where you could literally like Google for a game, and then for certain people in the Google search results, there was just a play button, and you could just play the game from your Google search results. Like there was like use cases they were trying to get to that they just didn't completely get to, that I think kind of spoke to the future possibilities. The idea that you could be watching an ad and then just straight up start playing that game. Similar to the way they try and do like that sort of thing with like mobile ads where like you can kind of try a little like tiny slice of the gameplay. And I think with cloud gaming, there's no reason you can't literally just jump straight into a AAA game that way.
Yeah.
It is, you're totally right, Devin, that, because of my personal and I guess like most Western investors perhaps bias or what we're exposed to, it's hard for me, it's still hard to see mobile as like as big as it is, right? Because I don't know anyone, like I don't play mobile games. I only play mobile games when I'm on a plane, essentially. That's it. I'll play some Archero and I get frustrated because it still requires internet half of the time. And so, after a while I can't play next level just because it's waiting for a connection, right? So you're like definitely a good point. And I also like need to realize that the game that I'm playing right now, for example, it's Civilization 6. It like that game would work perfectly with any type of streaming service, right? So we tend to think in like AAA, like Call of Duty, like game like scenarios, but most of the games are freaking like Bubble Witch Saga and all of these things. So Candy Crush, Super
Absolutely.
HD 4K Candy Crush. That's future of gaming.
There is like
Right
platforms trying to do cloud hosted like mobile game emulation so that you can play like Android games in the cloud and like emulators on your computer and stuff. And it's only a matter of time before we get to like being able to actually play on your phone those mobile games remotely. Because like there was that push example from Google and even Facebook where they were trying to do like instant play stuff or the ability to start playing games like really quickly. Because they had the whole thing like the for Google Play where it would like download just enough of the game to start playing it and then download the rest on the fly. And so obviously there's like a technological push to try and get there. And it's like, it seems dumb to us now because it hasn't gotten to the point where it's super convenient and just works. And it's like, you get glimpses of that with Stadia and sometimes even with the Xbox One. And it's like, well, yeah, you have to kind of admit, of course it's not there yet, but it's more like, let's look 10 years into the future when it's so seamless. You're just like, oh yeah, I remember when that was like a question. I remember when we were like, why would people do that? It's like, well, obviously, like the mobile gaming is a perfect example. I remember people be like, no one's going to be playing games on their phone. And you saw stuff like the N-Gage just completely fail. And you're just like, yeah, this is a stupid idea. And now it's like, it is really the biggest platform. Like it outnumbers consoles, everything. Like even like you look at esports, people be like, no one's going to play esports on their phone. And it's actually like the biggest esports industry. It's like mobile games. So we are a little, narrow focused on the areas that we tend to do. And it's harder to see the broader picture, especially globally, outside of your own continent.
Yeah, dude, it feels like all of these topics are way too interesting to have a short discussion about. So I guess distribution, in-app purchases, it's going to be for next week because we've reached our limits, and we want to keep these. I was going to say short, but it's not short. Medium length for you, Good. All right. So one thing I'm excited about to end this off with, that's the League of Legends World Championships have started. Yes. They started they're in the US, which is annoying because like I'm not going to say
it's not annoying, Nico. What?
That's really annoying because dude, I'm in bed by 10 p.m. so I never get to see any matches live, right? They play it throughout my nights. But then again, like in the morning I can just skip all of the pick'ems and stuff and just get into the game.
They go from 2 p.m. my time to 10 p.m. It's amazing. I'm used to having to wake up at 4 in the morning and turning it on. And it runs through the middle of the workday and I never get to watch any. So I know we have 3 esports nerds here. So yeah, it's great. It's dangerous.
So the only way, so I'll tell this publicly now. If my team, which is G2, makes it to the finals, then I'll wake up. Only then. Semis, not gonna happen. I'll watch it the next day. Finals, I'll do it.
You'll have to sit down and watch Carlos from G2.
Yeah, so that's another discussion. Maybe we can touch upon that next week. I know there's a lot of drama there, like a lot of drama. Anyway, good. That was it. Phil, Devin, this was fun. Thanks for joining. Listener, thank you for listening. If you made it till here, we really appreciate it. If you're not yet in our Discord, come join us. futureofgaming.wtf. If you like this, let us know. If you don't like this, let us know. If you think we're stupid and we said stupid things, definitely let us know. Because
make sure to click the like button and subscribe, ring that bell, give us 5 stars on Spotify and all that. So you
can get updated every time we upload a new episode. There's also going to be new segments coming. So there's some people in the FOGDAO, some members that we're going to be doing founder discussions. Like, what's the first year building a Web3 game like? Learnings, challenges. So should be fun. Good. That's it. It was fun. Let's speak to you in the next episode. Ciao.